Gera, for joining us. For those who may not know me, my name is Itai Tasharfi. I'm a long-term in the high-tech space. Currently work at Google in product management, and I'm also an adjunct professor at Cal State Fulton. At this series of videos, I'm interested in inspiring and educating people about the many paths to develop a career in the software space. We're going to talk in the series of presentation about people in many different roles, and especially in software, where there is quite a spectrum of expertise and how to get there. And I'm very happy that for this session, joining with me is Gera. Gera is a good friend back from the days at Maper Technologies, and one of the biggest experts I met in the field of distributed systems. So very happy to hear his thoughts about the direction of the field for those who are interested in joining. And yeah, thank you, Gera, for coming and taking the time to share with our listeners from your experience. And maybe a good place to start is maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself and what do you do?
Sure. Hello, Ty, and our future listeners. My name is Gera, and yes, I know Itai as a friend and a former coworker for a while. Thanks for inviting me. Um, so yeah, my name is Gera. I work currently as a distributed systems engineer at NVIDIA. My team works on GPU acceleration of Apache Spark, a popular kind of big data uh, Swiss knife kind of toolkit for um, uh, data processing, machine learning, some graph algorithm, and so on and so forth. And we specifically focus on acceleration of Spark SQL and data frame API. So kind of the industry widely accepted that NVIDIA graphics processing units are great for obviously everything graphics from games to video simulations of the real world. But not many people know that you can use it also for query processing, and we make it easy for the vertical of Spark users. And there are other similar use cases that NVIDIA works on.
That's pretty cool. GPU acceleration. I know we heard a lot about hardware-supported services. There is not only Bitcoin, but there is other types of GPU type of applications. Maybe, you have a lot of experience in this field. I think that hardware is relatively something that you got more involved in your last role. Can you maybe say how getting involved with the hardware is maybe changing the nature of the role versus in software versus if you're less involved with hardware?
Well, I think in general, understanding the system end to end, which includes the hardware, helps you as a professional to come up with the best possible solution. And it doesn't mean that you have to invent a new hardware, but if you know the system from the user and a type of interfaces from the graphics UI to web APIs to operating system calls to the hardware you're using, the better you are in your job, and you can come up with much better solutions and have a better judgment about what to do, and most importantly, what not to do.
Yeah, this is an excellent point. I think that especially if you work in the more advanced areas like you with the distributed system, a lot of hardware knowledge is important as well. And maybe something you can tell me is what is, you've been in the field for I think over 2 decades now. What is a day like in your life. So what does someone who is a senior engineer does most of the time? Do you like program or design, or maybe just spend the time in meetings, maybe open source collaborations or whatever? What do you do?
Yeah, I think it varies by organization and by the type of company you work for. Um, I've had a mix in my career already, and in some situations, as a senior engineer, you come up with designs of larger feature sets. Um, then you need to kind of disseminate this design, get the buy-in from many teams. So you spend time in meetings and iterating on documents. And after that, maybe only a small part of what you came up with will be implemented by yourself. Everything else will be done by somebody else. So this is what makes you a senior contributor. So your scope expands, and so your hands-on work reduces. In my current team, we have when a little bit different situation. Most engineers on my team are very, very senior, including much more senior than me. And so we do a little bit of the same stuff, but when we come up with designs, there is much less back and forth because the um, understanding of the concept is already assumed, so there's less education to do, and then you end up delivering larger pieces as an individual contributor as well. So I think you will, as a senior engineer or as a principal engineer, later on, you will land somewhere in between. And so it entirely depends. And probably in startups, you do everything from from design to coding, and there are only a few people you work with, so in a small team.
Interesting. And I have a question, like how you ended up in NVIDIA. So now you're NVIDIA with a well-branded company, and everybody knows, and you're having a senior role there. How did you ended up from starting your career? If I understand correctly, you originally studied outside of the US. What were some kind of milestone how you till the point that you arrived at NVIDIA at the current position?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did all of my higher education in Germany, where my family moved, immigrated at some point from Russia in the early 90s. We So I ended up getting there all the degrees possible, including PhD. And basically, I spent 10 years at the university, and I used to jokingly refer to myself as a long-term student, which is a kind of a negative term in German. It's easier to explain when you know German, Langzeitstudent. But that was just a joke. Anyways, so I get enough academic background there, but I did my internships. I was an intern at SAP at some point. Then I did another internship at Microsoft Research, and I saw a lot of opportunity that I can pursue in the United States. And so I basically made them my priority to get my first job after PhD in the US. And so my first job out of school was Oracle, and I worked on transactional messaging in one of the many Oracle application servers. Uh, After that, I moved to another team at Oracle where I worked on database recovery. of the core database product, because since my graduate student days, I really like dealing with transactions, transaction management, concurrency control, and making systems robust. So that was one of the kind of my postgraduate milestones. And after that, I learned a lot about web scale management, data management challenges with companies that were consumer oriented, like Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, whatnot, and this whole big data movement arose out of this, and I wanted to see how I can contribute in that space. So I joined my part technologies with this desire, and that's where I met Adai. Uh, so after that, I actually ended up. So in this company, we learned a lot about algorithms and how to scale systems, but it was a very infrastructure uh, driven work where the customers had the cool use cases for applying this technology. So I was still very curious how really to make the best use of not only how to make best use out of the system we build, like my power file system and MapReduce framework that we put on top of it, but like what is the end goal there, and what is the real motivation behind it. So to learn that, I joined Twitter in the end, and spent there 4 years doing uh, maintaining their big data infrastructure, including Hadoop clusters, but also writing open source frameworks or contributing to open source frameworks like Hadoop itself, Scalding, and so on and so forth. As well as then I still was not satisfied. I was still felt that I'm too remote from the actual product, so I joined the experimentation team that was responsible for the platform used to run A/B tests onto Twitter. And A/B tests were involving not just UI features, but also evaluated ML algorithms used for timeline ranking. So how you see tweets presented to you in the home timeline. Yeah, what happened after that? So after that, I joined Salesforce, the Einstein platform team, where the focus was on creating a ML unified ML platform that all Salesforce products can use. So this is more like a ML platform ops and ML ops kind of organization that tried to unify all use cases that then were delivered as apps to Salesforce users. So you could have recommendations for service agents, or um, uh, predictions for customer churn, all packaged in different flexible builders. So basically, you could stitch an ML application from very flexibly without hard coding the pipeline. And it's very important for Salesforce because they have every customer has a lot of custom fields. The schema is not predefined. So it's quite a challenging task. And yeah, so in my last milestone is NVIDIA, the Apache Spark acceleration team that I'm on. I got to this because I was using a lot of Spark myself on the on the previous job at Salesforce, and again, So I switched a little bit from going back from what is the use case, from the question, what is the use case, to the question, how it's done and how it can be done better on a new hardware platform like an NVIDIA GPU.
So thank you for this overview. And it sounds like you have been at different parts of the stack, all the way from the application to down working almost at the hardware level, at least optimizing for hardware. For somebody, go ahead.
I'm saying, yeah, there are a lot of layer in in the NVIDIA stack as well, and part of it is open source where we work. We have a whole rapid framework for data science that includes a data frame library called QDF, which we employ, and all is based on the kind of compute abstraction for GPUs called CUDA. So all this work is all my work on this team is an open source.
So this is interesting.
Of it.
So you through your career, you moved into different parts of the stack, working in different areas, from experimentation to more about the ML to the different optimizations of file system back at MedPar. How would you recommend somebody maybe more junior coming into the field think about developing expertise? It might be appropriate to maybe focus on a certain area, for example, optimization regarding certain hardware, versus someone who might want to do many different things or be at different parts of the backend. How's kind of maybe a good way to think about that from a career perspective?
I think from the career perspective, you want to think about it, and it's not necessarily how I thought about it, but I have an opinion how probably I should have approached this at some point.
We come to learn here from the experience.
But we learn, yeah, we learn. So that's a learning experience. That's right. So I would give myself an advice to evaluate the market, understand the industries, applications, and find your passion, like what drives you, and try to find kind of the intersection of what has a bright future in the market and is also to your liking and provides you most of the satisfaction and learning experience, whatever it is, what you want to optimize for. So you can, there are multiple priorities you can have. So I seem to prioritize learning a lot. Some people like teaching more, or some people are driven more by financial outcomes. So, I mean, we obviously all participate in this market, so it's a very important aspect. But how much emphasis you put on various components of this, it certainly defines you as a person, and it's different for everybody. So I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to this question, other than to understand your priorities.
Makes sense.
In this.
And you spend, as you mentioned, quite a long time in academia, getting all the degrees, and I think also spending some extra time at Max Planck Institute. When you see people, they might have coming into CS, they might have only bachelor, they might have maybe not even a bachelor, they might have a master's degree, they might have a PhD, they might be professors who are changing into that industry. How do you find the impact of this different level of education, from maybe going to a boot camp all the way to being a professor who left the academia to pursue work in the industry? How does that impact?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on the context and the culture. So where I received my degrees in Germany, they have maybe a little bit too much emphasis on formal degrees, and sometimes it's even expected to have an advanced degree outside the academics, where it's quite obvious that, yeah, if you want a tenured position, obviously you need a PhD, and then you do all this other work postgraduate and so on and so on. Fourth, but you know, sometimes it's getting even more. I won't say ridiculous, but it in certain at certain in certain situations, like when you in Germany, at least when you run for a political office, it's expected that you have a doctoral degree. But why? Like, not necessarily shows your leadership skills or. Anyways, we digress, but I mean there are different contexts for this to consider. In my case, I didn't plan to pursue kind of a PhD beyond. I was planning to get my minimum degree out of the university, which is in Germany. Used to be diploma before they also introduced bachelor and so on. And my but I was in an excellent research group where I did my diploma thesis. And when my advisor approached me with an idea that I can stay for a PhD to work on my next level PhD thesis, and kind of also gave me a taste of what it can be like going attending international conferences, publish papers, and participating in the cutting edge research. I kind of grabbed that opportunity and did it, and it's helpful, but it doesn't mean it's the only way. Especially, I think in the U.S., it's absolutely not. Again, it's helpful, but it's not required. So if we want to have a good career in our industry, as long as you are good, as long and and you're never done learning. So you keep learning regardless how many degrees you have. And so degrees is just a degree is just a formalization and maybe a proof that at least once you did it, you were able to master an advanced subject. So that's maybe what makes you more attractive in the market, because like in the default case, you're totally unknown to the hiring company, so they need to make some judgments calls out of the offer out of the candidate pipeline. So.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I don't think a PhD is required in the US for public office.
Yeah, it's not required there either. It's just sometimes basically assume that you have it.
Cool. So maybe one more thought is that you worked at small companies and you worked at large companies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on both companies, you worked on quite advanced technologies. How would you think about the maybe pros and cons of somebody who might have a choice, maybe join to a startup, let's say, that, again, in the quite advanced distributed system versus somebody who can join maybe a larger company? How they should think about this?
So I think startups provide a lot of opportunities for an individual to shine and to contribute very significantly to the success of the company. It can be also, um, yeah, provide you with lots of learning opportunities outside of your field. In my case, like when I joined Mapar, it was still small enough that everybody sat in one room, and I was able to over here or participate in conversations which I would normally never be part of, like between salespeople, between support people working with customer right in front of me. I sit next to the CTO and can join a conversation if when I hear that something that where I can contribute. So this was surreal in this sense. So it was so great, and nothing like that would or with very low probability would have happened to me at Oracle, let's say, where I'm just one of many thousand employees, and even in my building, I'm just in some corner where I sit with the people working on something similar that I work on. So there's no, unless I formally reach out and start taking some classes, I will never learn about the subject. So that was very interesting. The other, but so on the other side, on the other hand, when you're at a startup, it usually revolves around one bright idea, one excellent opportunity. Hopefully, there is a roadmap how to scale that opportunity and capture the market, the world, whatever, expand your niche. But everything else is not. It's pretty immature. So the infrastructure, you will, if you've seen it before at a kind of well-oiled machine like a big company like Microsoft or Oracle, will not be there. So where you just assume that all builds work or the build infrastructure always works, and if it's broken, that for sure it's your change that broke it. Here you have to, as a startup, you have to kind of question everything from the hardware that we bought for cheap to the build that was still evolving and things like that. So what I want to say with us that you need to see both a mature company and a new startup to appreciate the size. And if you want to build a startup, you know what the systems should look like and where to find people who can build it for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think that this, as you mentioned, one bright idea, and that's the area, and you get good visibility into it. But maybe other parts are less mature.
But it also provides you with this opportunity. So basically, since nothing works, nothing else works. So you know how you can contribute to better test infrastructure, better anything. You can exchange ideas with the marketing person that sits right next to you, and so on and so forth. And you kind of see how things fit end to end. So there is a product. So you're not just building something. You're building something that this person next to you needs to sell.
So when you pick your specialization, which I assume you like doing that for 2 decades or so now, you probably have seen people that join the area and excel dramatically. And you've seen people that got frustrated, leading them to either like very low job satisfaction or performance, or then in the end might left the area. What do you think are some attributes someone who goes to do this type of advanced distributed systems, people that potentially would shine there, and people that it might not be a good fit, based on what you've seen?
I was fortunate enough not to see like big failures, but I've seen kind of average versus great successes. Uh, Sometimes it's more of my gut feeling. like where I put a thumb on the scale and had somebody hired, and this person performed well. I like was super happy about it. Like um, like there were two instances like this at least, and I'm really proud of this because like I saw the potential where person I like to see people who I see the potential that in the end I will be learning from them at some point. So or they will be great collaborators. But in terms like just database specific skills, I mean it's just the like in everywhere in computer science, if you have um, an inclination to do to describe work in formal terms like a math problem and understand that things need to work correctly conceptually before you even build them. This is a very important skill and to kind of grasp problems abstractly before you dive into little details. Basically you think Uh, wh- like what are the chances that you run into deadlocks versus you build a system that you can verify mathematically? It should not have deadlocks, and so this makes you much more effective in your job. Um, so yeah, there are some basics that we kind of always screen for. You know, computer science, basic data structures, algorithms, and how. But I sort of still feel that this kind of interview process is not sufficient. It it allows to weed out kind of gross mis kind of candidates that will definitely not work out. But even then, I'm not totally sure. Like people can have the bad days and everything, but yeah, usually if the interview loop shows that like multiple people had the same opinion, so probably there is something to it. But in general, so I'd like to see kind of more deep assessments. So, for example, now that people participate in open source projects, uh, it's easy to see what kind of PRs they contribute, how they discuss, how do they argue for the change they're proposing, how do they react to reviews, how do they review. Some people don't contribute code necessarily, maybe, but they provide excellent reviews. So okay, they're awesome mentors.
So this is an interesting point I would like to ask more about. You mentioned open source. So you're involved with a couple of open source projects in the past, and one of the things that you can do is to get involved with open source projects. And my question is, how should someone thinks about joining open source project for, let's say, career perspective, getting involved, maybe, you know, interacting with people, maybe creating some online reputation, if it's GitHub or if it's something else? What would be a good framework to think about that? And another thing is, should they do it as only part of their full-time job? So that means their full-time job gets them involved with an open source project, or is there opportunities maybe for students or other people to get involved with something that is not maybe they're part of their full-time employment? What's like a good framework to think about open source in building a career?
Well, I've seen kind of, yeah, two use cases of this. Some people choose open source projects for something that are that represent a cause they care about. The the others choose it just for their new milestone education. They want to pivot into some new field, and obviously their current resume doesn't necessarily is telling recruiters that they can be good in this subject, and through participating in such open source projects, they can demonstrate it. And obviously, once you start looking and actively participating in, let's say, pull requests, it's also a learning opportunity that which enables you later to contribute if you're completely new to that. So yeah, to be honest, I never did it for either of these reasons. It came kind of as a package through the jobs I already had. So at Twitter, as part of the Hadoop team, I was contributing to Hadoop. Then I was, but I usually like. So what I like about open source is that unlike traditional proprietary software, that the only choice you have when you encounter a certain deficiency or a pure bug, the only reaction you can have is to, hopefully, if you have a support contract, you file a ticket and hopefully they fix it for you at some point. So with open source, you can react much faster, so you can learn about the system you're using and look at the source code and try to fix it yourself, which is faster. And sometimes, basically, at companies like Twitter, probably there is no other choice because the turnaround time for bug fixes is in a traditional setting is too long. Where this, with an open source model, you can fix something or create a band-aid workaround in within a reasonable time frame of like few hours or a day, and have it in production already. And then once it's tested out, you can, when you contribute your fix, you're much more have much more weight and reputation to say that that fix was not just theoretically a fix. We put it in production and it was running for a while already, and it's working. So that's probably why many companies love open source.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite interesting. Someone can, I think, as you mentioned, if they have a gap or they want to develop an expertise, they can get involved with an open source project. As part of the hiring process, would people actually go into your GitHub or any other location that you have and look at your code and evaluate the quality of what you're doing, and that will be part of the consideration of if to hire you or not sometimes?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think this should be at least 50% of the evaluation, if not more, because as I said, the actual interview gives only a tiny glimpse on how the person works on a very artificial problem that probably will not be very common in your company or in their actual job, but this is the only way how we learned to evaluate. It's definitely working, but it's not working great. And so I think the strongest signal you can get from so through open source, you can collaborate with somebody who is not in your company yet, but you already know that they work great or not great. So, for example, I now work with people I collaborated with on Hadoop way before I joined NVIDIA. So it feels like my job actually didn't change much in that sense.
Interesting. And going to the hiring with process, which again, as you mentioned, like it's not perfect. What are some qualities that you're looking for, like qualities that would easily or maybe are important to have somebody hired, versus maybe some red flags that makes it difficult to get hired? And how do you prepare for that? How do you make sure that you will excel and not fail badly at the interview? What can you do?
Well, in our technical field, I think it's very important to have very clear communication, demonstrate reasoning, to be honest about situations where you simply don't know, and just explain your thinking process, because it's not binary. Like we all, at any given moment, there's always a lot more that we don't know that we know than what we know. And this is part of the job. And it's like when I think if somebody gives this, simple, right, correct answers offhand, most likely they just heard this problem before and they learned it by heart. It doesn't give me any insight how she or he works, thinks about problems. So it's more interesting, actually. Yeah, okay, you don't know. Let's start. And I like this to be a collaborative process, so I can get a feel what it is like when we work together already in a formal setting, when you joined my or some other team as a coworker.
Yeah. And what makes somebody like a strong resume that will get them that interview? What are some things that are important, at least on the CS and maybe more of the back end, kind of the hard technical areas, that will make somebody a candidate that might get an interview?
It's an interesting question. I'm not the I don't do much of recruiting to give you an accurate, and I mean I can also I try to imagine from the description on the resume what complexity the problem the job entailed, so to imagine what it is like to have somebody like this candidate on our team. It's not about necessarily working on exactly literally our narrow field. It's exactly about, okay, was it a complex problem? Was it difficult to do? Did they demonstrate success? And can I find traces of it? So, and now I'm trying to think as a recruiter, so I will probably look if the item on the resume quotes some open source work. I will look at the traces there, like how significant were the contributions, as were they as significant as claimed. Probably the recruiters will also look, okay, if somebody talks about a smashing success for some project, like was it followed by a promotion, or I can imagine that people in HR work like that. It's not what I do, but yeah, that would make sense to me.
Yeah, those are good tips. So maybe changing to a different question. You've been in the field for quite long now. And as sometimes you're seeing, there is, those are not mutually exclusive, but often there is like two type of career path. There is the career path of the expert, the domain or the technical expertise. Someone might say like an Uber TL, someone who's like knows really, really strong, maybe kind of like a CTO. And then there is a career track of management. So people who become managers and just managing more people in the field. When somebody is considering those maybe two different type of opportunities, do they require different career planning, or are they the same? What are kind of the difference between those two career paths? How somebody ended up as kind of an Uber TL maybe as an IC or like a small lead versus somebody who becomes like, I don't know, like a director who's managing a bunch of people. Any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think, yeah, indeed, those are different skill sets and different talents that people have. Some people excel in as an individual contributor. Some people excel in organizing and managing things and people. And I think there's an overlap, at least for career success. As an individual contributor, you want to understand what makes a successful manager to be most effective in delivering what management expects from you. Uh, Equally, at least as the closer you are to the front lines, as a manager, I have never been, but I think from the other side, I can judge. So the most effective managers I have had, they had a very good understanding how, uh, like, what are the technical ramifications of the job, and they are most effective in managing the team and delivery of their objectives if they are not only develop good people management skills, but still have decent enough understanding of the tech. And so it means they don't code, but they understand how to make back of the envelope calculations, how to um, align teams, how to um, distribute tasks efficiently. So often, if the man, I will say, an efficient, a manager that is not deep enough in the technical field may ineffectively distribute tasks that should rather be grouped in a single kind of task set and given to a single team member instead of being distributed and creating like a lot of communication overhead and coordination overhead between uh, and but you also need to have this excellent people management skills where you understand every individual's uh, talents, ways of work, how to make him most or her most effective on their job. Just from not from technical standpoint, but from understanding the person behind the individual contributor.
And when you talked about your overall journey to NVIDIA, you talked about picking places in many cases by maybe by some type of experience. So you were looking at different areas and you joined the company, maybe the best company that presented that opportunity. What are some other factors that now you've learned regarding joining companies or joining managers or joining a certain culture? What are some things, maybe tips that you can give to our listeners on how to evaluate if joining a company is a good idea?
Yeah, I think so. It's about what suits you as an individual and what your priorities, what I talked about before. So certain people like to plan their entire career ahead of time. So they do envision where they want to be. And it's important for them in terms of the position. And then, there are certain milestones you need to hit. I don't know, like if you want to be a CEO of, let's say, a large corporation, Forbes 500, you want to be able to hit a bunch of milestones first at the lower level, but you want to be in the leadership positions and grow with some startup into similar positions. And it's not different from um, for the technical contributors. So I guess what I'm saying that probably if you want to just grow through the ladder and like you're satisfied with the you know, single employer experience, so probably the optimal way to achieve that, you find a company that covers the range of your interest and stick with that company and just grow your knowledge of the existing systems there, like, and that helps you to be promoted to where you want to be after certain years. Uh, or you can diversify. Yeah, so it basically depends on your personality, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what you mentioned is growth and
Yes.
look for that growth
But
opportunities.
right, but growth can be intellectual and not necessarily. So you maybe expand the breadth of your knowledge, but doesn't necessarily catapult you to the highest level on the IC ladder in any given company. But of course, if you're, I mean, usually good people get promoted. So this is even you didn't spend all your life with the same employer, which is not the common anyways anymore.
Yeah, makes sense. Towards maybe the end of the interview, I do have a question that I wonder. So you've been in the space for some time, have seen the market go up and down and round, and so areas growing very fast, and so their decline later. One of the things now is that as we look into the tech space and we see unfortunate layoffs in many places, and I think that we all know people that were impacted. What are some thoughts regarding areas that maybe are growing strong now? So areas that perhaps are more resistant to the trend, and areas where people are hired and are growing and people can expect to build, at least for the midterm, a career in a growth area, versus maybe areas that perhaps are better to avoid because they are shrinking. Do you see any type of those areas more on the back end from a skill set perspective?
Uh, I personally, yeah, I think the best way to address this is just not just. This is where the academia is very helpful, to see everything as a combination of fundamental concepts that come together in a bunch of applications and industries. So you don't necessarily stick to some um, very particular technology with a very particular vendor that may indeed disappear. Uh, and as long, even if it happens, as long as you are good in it and demonstrate that you can learn, acquire additional. So this is not your let's vendor X. This is the only thing you know, and then you're still a good candidate for other opportunities for other startups because you demonstrated that you um, were able to excel in this example, and hopefully you have a bunch of other examples where you accomplished a lot or something significant. So I mean, yeah, bearing with kind of now new, more revolutionary disruptions in the computing industry, like maybe quantum computing, which maybe works very different. The rest, like the majority of the industry, midterm is still, again, just the same, a bunch of same bunch of data structures, same bunch of algorithms applied just to a different use case. So as long as you see it this way, there will be no problem in succeeding in whatever application you choose.
Interesting. So when we started the interview, I said that I'm currently teaching a class at Cal State Fulton. We have about 30 students, and they are master degree full-time, looking for their maybe first employment after the master degree. So the time might be quite soon. What are some, maybe what's like one or two tips that you can give to students who are entering the job market under those conditions? What would those be?
So my first tip would be, which is it's probably known by most of your students anyways, is to do as many internships as possible during the studies still at school, because it's a great way to try it before you buy it for both future employers and future candidates, and you can try different types of companies so to see whether a startup is the right fit for you, because as I said, it comes with not just with the positive excitement, but with a whole set of problems, and you will see whether it's something for you. Obviously, all startups are different, but anyways, this is something that's very hard to evaluate before you actually were part of it, and like after that, again, once you got some understanding of the job market, again, make sure that you know what your priorities in life are, like what kind of career you want, and pursue it accordingly. So, but I think it's great, and it's a kind of nothing is final in this, which is great for our industry so far, has been that it's relatively easy to switch careers despite the periodic downturns in the market. Overall, we still enjoy high demand for our skills.
Yeah, that's a good tip about the internships. I think that yes, definitely get more of that experience is useful. So just last question. If you were not working in software, you were not a software engineer, what would you do and why?
That's a good question. In So what I'm thinking from time to time is that it's great to have maybe not a final decision to leave tech, but have like some sort of sabbatical where I can just come leave my day-to-day job aside and think of ideas. And many of my ideas will probably be about tech and some startup ideas that I might have on my own, um, where like instead of being an employee, I can be an entrepreneur or at least a founder of something. Uh, this is one area that I'm thinking about. Uh, but I think what is also great just to use such time, maybe not necessarily to um, pursue it myself afterwards, but like to just I like to brainstorm with talented people, and so in this kind of brainstorms, I learn from them, but hopefully there is some great product idea that can come out of it as well. So, but if I were to talk about something completely outside tech, so like with the current events, I'm greatly concerned about international security. So I like spend a lot of time understanding how it works and what can be done to improve it. So uh, I think this deserve this will deserve a lot of my attention.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan for the sabbatical. It was very good to see you again. And thank you for taking the time to talk with our listeners slash students slash people who are interested in the developing career in the software space. And I'm very thankful for doing this and looking forward to chat soon.
Thank you, Ty, for having me. It was great to see you. And good luck to our listeners.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye bye.